Hello, everyone, and welcome to the TDWI webinar program. I'm Andrew Miller, and I'll be your moderator. For today's program, we're going to discuss how to modernize and govern unifying your data strategy. And our sponsors today are Databricks and Impetus. For our presentations today, we'll hear first from Fern Halper with TDWI. And after Fern speaks, we'll be joined by Kaudinya Srinivasa Rao and with Databricks and Sanjay Sharma with Impetus for presentations and a panel discussion. Before I turn over the time to our speakers, please allow me to go over a few basics. Today's webinar will be about an hour long, and at the end of their presentations, our speakers will host a question and answer period. So if at any time during these presentations you'd like to submit a question, just use the Ask a Question area on your screen to type in your question. If you have any technical difficulties during the webinar, you can click on the Technical FAQs area and you'll receive technical assistance. And if you'd like a copy of today's presentation, please locate the resource window to download the PDF. Lastly, we are recording today's event and we'll be emailing you a link to an archived version of the presentation, which you can view again if you'd like, or you can share with a colleague. All right, again, today we're going to be discussing modernizing and governing, unifying your data strategy. And our first speaker is Fern Halper. She's the Vice President and Senior Director of TDWI Research for Advanced Analytics. Fern is well known in the analytics community, having been published hundreds of times on data mining and information technology over the past 20 years. She's also the co-author of several dummies books on cloud computing and big data. Fern focuses on advanced analytics, including predictive analytics, machine learning, AI, cognitive computing, and big data analytics approaches. She's been a partner at industry analyst firm Hurwitz and Associates and a lead data analyst for Bell Labs, and she's taught at both Colgate University and Bentley University, and her Ph.D. is from Texas A&M University. With that, please welcome Fern, and I will hand it over to you now.
Great, thanks Andrew, and hi everyone, and welcome to this webinar. We're really glad you could join us. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to kick things off, and I'm going to talk about what we're seeing at TDWI in terms of the current state of modern platforms and data governance, and I'll also talk about the benefits of addressing data management and governance as a single initiative and how automation can help with this. As Andrew mentioned, we'll hear from Databricks and Impetus with their perspectives, and we'll spend a good chunk of the webinar in a panel discussion where we'll discuss issues such as what to migrate and what to leave, how to embed governance by design, and the trade-offs between centralized and federated governance. So the first point I want to make here is about the current state of the data environment. It's hybrid and it's complex as organizations try to modernize for AI, and that is their primary reason for modernizing, to support AI and other innovations. Now, this chart is from a 2025 survey where we asked about the data management tools that organizations are using. And you could see a bunch of data management tools there. The relational database management system is at the top of the list. You can also see that cloud platforms such as Cloud Data Warehouse and Cloud Data Lakes, they surpass usage of their on-premises counterparts. So if you look down the list, you'll see that. So for instance, close to 50% of the respondents are saying that they use a Cloud Data Warehouse, but only about 40% are saying that they use a data warehouse on premises. And the difference is much greater in terms of a data lake on premises and in the cloud. If you look down the list, you'll see that less than 10% are using an on-premises data lake. And then in the middle of the list there, you'll see the data lakehouse, and close to 30% of respondents to this survey said that they're making use of the data lakehouse. I've seen data lakehouse over 40% in some other surveys. And this type of platform has been making a lot of waves in the market and has really increased in adoption over the past few years. So the data lakehouse, such as that, is really a combination of a data lake and a data warehouse, and it provides warehouse data structures and data management functions on a lower cost platform, such as a cloud object store. So this type of platform can really help unify all kinds of data, and it doesn't fall into the trap of the data lake that became a swamp, and organizations had to get rid of it, which is why you see so few data lakes in that on-premises data lakes there. And And it's been helpful as organizations are moving to support AI. Now, when we ask about the biggest priorities for data management in 2025, you could see that data governance is a top priority, and that's behind supporting sophisticated analytics for AI, and which I already talked about as being the top priority. And if you look at the bars there, you could see 3 different bars. They include things like deploying a data catalog, implementing or updating data governance, and then strengthening data security and privacy. So sort of all of those top priorities are around data governance and getting ready for AI with the platform. And right below that, not surprisingly then, is the migration to cloud platforms. And this is still underway as a priority. And then the bottom of the list, sometimes it's interesting to look at what's at the bottom as well as what's at top. Things like deploying this data lake on premises is at like 5%. So I found that interesting based on what we were just saying. Now, when organizations try to modernize, that often involves deciding what to move. And organizations may want to move and modernize their legacy systems that already have a footprint, but these systems are often fragile and they're hard to understand. They may not even be governed. And some vendors may say that a lift and shift approach can work, but that might not be enough. There can be issues when, in the case of legacy applications, monolithic architectures aren't really adapted to distributed cloud environments, including there can be things like performance degradation around that. Lift and shift can also limit the ability to leverage all of the features that are on these newer cloud platforms, including cloud services like AI and machine learning, managed databases, and the list goes on, really. So, at TDWI, we used to have this saying where we say, don't just move, improve, so really the idea is that you want to get value out of the new platform. And you could see here that about 40% of TDWI survey respondents believe that they're very successful migrating legacy systems to the cloud. So that leaves 60% who don't necessarily feel that way. So that's basically, the current state of what's happening with data modernization. It's sort of like organizations are partway there. And that's also reinforced by what we're seeing in some of our TDWI assessments. So for instance, here's some overall data from our TDWI AI readiness assessment. And we look across different dimensions in the assessment, 2 of them being data readiness and governance readiness. So you could see the average scores for both data readiness and governance readiness are about 12. And this is out of 20 points. So really that puts organizations, again, like sort of midway in their journey overall. Of course, there are some organizations that are more ready than others. This is sort of the average look at it. And sort of, if you look at the average look at this, what's happening basically is that organizations are typically collecting maybe more than just structured data. So they may be collecting unstructured data, but they're not necessarily analyzing it. They're working to make data easily accessible, and they typically utilize a range of platforms, as you saw in the other slide, including a data warehouse or a data lake, both on premises and in the cloud. So it's a hybrid environment to manage this diverse data. And sometimes these platforms can support building predictive analytics and machine learning models, primarily against structured data, not the unstructured text and other types of data that organizations are interested in. And many are still trying to build a platform to support growth. So when you ask them if what they have is scalable and can support all new types of applications, that's not necessarily the case. Likewise, on the data governance side, many respondents are still struggling with ensuring trusted data across their platforms. So for example, in this readiness assessment that I'm talking about, less than 20% of the respondents said that they had a solid data governance program in place that outlines key policies and processes. That's in part probably because the scope of data that organizations are trying to govern, has really broadened, as I mentioned, to include all of these diverse data types. And less than 40% of the respondents stated that their organization understands its data sources and has the right policies in place to deal with different kinds of data. So not surprisingly, when data readiness is high, the governance scores are higher too, which sort of supports the hypothesis that, or the notion really, that governance shouldn't be an afterthought. So those that score higher with data readiness also tend to be putting governance in place, and hopefully not as an afterthought, but as part of, what they're actually doing as they're building their. So I have here higher correlations are what's expected, as I just said. What we see is that governance around structured data, things like using a data catalog, having data stewards in place, that often correlates with higher scores in data readiness. So these organizations already have a lot of these sort of tools and processes in place for, at least for structured data. However, on the AI side, there seems to be less correlation around things like AI ethics, model governance, and security and privacy, for the model, for the data that's feeding the models, which, is what we're seeing, because organizations are just now starting to think about, well, I've been dealing with data governance, now I also have to deal with AI governance. And, the correlation between data readiness and data governance is good news, that a lot of organizations are thinking about the two together. But data governance really can't be an afterthought for many reasons. So first, there are compliance reasons, think about GDPR, now the EU AI Act, DORA for financial services, and other types of regulations that require data governance. Second, it needs to be part of the design as you're developing your systems. So upfront data governance is going to support AI needs for higher data quality, governance as an enabler. It's going to decrease compliance risks. It's going to support analytics. It's going to help stakeholder alignment. It's going to help that actually happen earlier, because if you think about it, if you need the stakeholders involved in your governance activities, then they're also going to start talking about what their business goals are, so it can actually help to align stakeholders earlier then. So the idea then is to look for a platform that can unify the data management with the data governance. And you could see here that I say that more than 60% of respondents to a recent survey we did believe that centralizing distributed data in a unified platform such as a data lakehouse is very important. And I touched on why organizations like the lakehouse concept. You think about the data warehouse that deals primarily with structured data in a predefined schema. The data lakehouse can store massive amounts of both structured and unstructured data. And whereas the traditional data warehouse was supporting primarily analytics like reports and dashboards, the lakehouse can support more advanced, compute-intensive, and iterative analytics like machine learning and other forms of AI. The data lake itself can store large amounts of raw data, but it has no real structure and doesn't support querying. Data lakehouses can support efficient querying and analysis. And additionally, the problem with data lakes really was partly they weren't ACID compliant. Most data lakes are. And then traditional data lake platforms weren't really designed to separate compute resources from storage. And when they aren't decoupled, when one grows, the other one grows, and that can be costly. And a lot of data lakehouses will separate the two. And lest we forget, modern data lakehouses also have governance built into the platform, as we'll discuss. So the features that support governance in the platform might include things like fine-grained access controls, a data catalog for findability, data lineage for tracing what happened to the data, where it came from, what happened to it, where it's going, model management, in the case of AI models, a way to version models, in some sort of registry, being able to monitor the models in production. And these platforms can also include automation. So for instance, they might have tools that are part of the data catalog or in another part of the tool that will do things like classify sensitive data, which is obviously really important when you're dealing with compliance and analytics, or tools, AI-infused automated tools that do things like identify anomalies in the data for data quality purposes. And in a recent TDWI survey, close to 3/4 of the respondents said that it's important to make use of these intelligent AI-infused tools for profiling, transforming, and processing data. I also think that, if you think about a shared operational foundation, like this data lakehouse that has governance in it, in some ways, even though you have data stewards and others, the features in the platform can help in some ways to guide the process. Anyway, so those are some of my preliminary thoughts about unified modern platforms and data governance and about migrating data to these platforms. What I'm going to do is turn it over to Andrew to introduce our speakers from Databricks and Impetus, and they'll give their point of view, and then we'll dive a bit deeper into the topic in our panel discussion. So Andrew, back over to you.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, Fern. That was a great presentation there. And yes, now it's my pleasure to introduce today's guest speakers, first of which is Kaudinya Srinivasarao with Databricks. Kaudinya is a solutions architecture leader at Databricks focused on driving adoption of Databricks SQL, working with customers on architecture definition and cloud strategy for data, AI, and analytics. In his time at Databricks, he has led some of the largest implementations with a strong focus on governance and user adoption. And we're also joined today by Sanjay Sharma with Impetus. Sanjay is a hands-on architect working in big data and cloud technologies for the last 15 years with overall software industry experience of around 22 years. He is responsible for leaf logic engineering and architecture and currently leads multiple modernization projects with Fortune 500 companies. Welcome to both of you, and I will hand it over to you now, Kaudinya, for your presentation.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks a lot. At Databricks, our mission is to help democratize data and AI for all of our customers. And what I mean by that is making data and AI accessible to this really broad set of customers. We have 15,000 plus customers across all the different verticals, so everything from financial services to healthcare, life sciences, manufacturing, communications, media, entertainment, to the digital natives. And among each one of these customers, what we typically see when we engage with them initially is that they have this data and AI estate that is completely fragmented. You have a separate data warehouse where that is primarily used, say, for your BI and some reporting. You have a data lake where through ETL, perhaps you migrated or moved to this data lake from some sort of a Hadoop or big data system. That's where you typically do your ETL. You're dealing with large volumes of data. You have yet another third technology stack for streaming, and your BI happens elsewhere. You have a whole bunch of semantic models, data models that semantic layer is represented and built in the BI tool, but then every single BI tool or every single group of BI tools have their own definition of what these data products are. And there is no cohesive single sort of understanding or definition of this data. And then comes in AI, right, and generative AI. The machine learning is its entire own stack, and very often each one of these stacks, to really be able to use that component of this architecture, you end up having to make copies of data. This becomes cost prohibitive very, very quickly. The hardest thing in AI is actually data. AI has certain challenges too, but the hardest problem that you're looking to typically solve is the data itself. And this operational costs and the silos that exist with this fragmented ecosystem is a big problem. And very often, each one of these technologies has some sort of proprietary lock-in where you have a separate copy of this data logged in there. On top of that, there is a separate governance layer that each one implements, and there is no single central sort of understanding of, hey, who has access to which data sets and which data products. Right? And this is where the Databricks comes in, and the lakehouse architecture that Fern was talking about comes in. The key value and the key sort of insight that Databricks brought to the market, to the ecosystem almost 4 or 5 years ago at this point, was the lakehouse pattern, where we anchored the lakehouse architecture on that storage layer, being basically taking that proprietary storage layer and moving that onto the lake and entirely using open standards and open formats. Now, having this open formats now means suddenly that movement of the data, the silo of the data, starts becoming a problem. Right? Now, to top that, our approach is not of adopting these open formats and open standards. It's not just at the storage layer. This is something that permeates throughout the platform, right? We start with the open formats. This is where Delta and Apache Iceberg are both very popular open table formats, right? So that is the core architecture of Databricks as well as the lakehouse pattern. But building on top of that, we give the ability to also have an open catalog, basically a metadata store where we can exchange this data. We can provide this data to different engines that are not necessarily Databricks engines. And this gives you this freedom and flexibility of architecture. And lastly, it's the ecosystem, right? It's not just about the data that's within the lakehouse, but also being able to connect to all these disparate systems. It could be your SAP instance, and this is a unique offering within Databricks where without actually copying your SAP data, we give users the ability to explore, analyze this data, and then actually use it in building AI models. In addition to SAP, there's a whole bunch of different sources that we support and the different bunch of tools that we support. So if you have analytical engineers who love dbt, we provide an interface where they can bring that same dbt surface, but still manipulate the data that's within the lakehouse. That openness is at the heart of Databricks. Now, beyond the architectural capabilities itself, how we build these features, different capabilities in the platform, the openness also permeates there. As an example, very often when you're coming from a legacy data warehouse ecosystem, you are dealing with multi-table transactions. This could be either because there are certain patterns you've implemented where you need to synchronize and have certain isolation level guarantees across multiple tables that you're manipulating. Here, we introduce this capability on the open table formats, Delta and Iceberg. And additionally, we took on an approach where we actually provide a row-level concurrency, which ends up giving you far better performance than what we are seeing in most common cloud data warehouses, where there's a more coarser-grained sort of transaction that happens. These are just examples. Our SQL surface, for example, is entirely aligned to the ANSYS SQL, and similarly, how we support other semi-structured data types as well. Now, openness is one aspect of your architecture. The other critical component or critical aspect is the governance, right? As I showed in the previous picture, you had each one of these different data systems, different components of the data architecture, it had its own governance implemented natively within those solutions. With the lakehouse architecture, we actually unify the governance. All these different assets, right? We bring them all under one umbrella, and that umbrella is called as Unity Catalog. Unity Catalog itself is open source, so this again is an architecture that can be implemented on other platforms as well. Now, within Unity Catalog, we unify the governance across all the assets. And by all the assets, I'm talking about structured data sitting in your tables, views, materialized views, etc., as well as unstructured data. This will be files, your PDFs, your videos, right? If you're implementing a generative AI use case, you want to actually extract some insights from that unstructured data. That can all still be governed. Just because you're taking on getting on this journey of dealing with unstructured data, a lot of the access control, auditing, lineage, those capabilities, those still are a requirement. You don't leave those behind. And Unity Catalog provides that. And we also tie this together with AI assets, your models, right? And specifically, we tie models to specific versions of data sets, something that's super critical when it comes to compliance and explainability. And thus, we give you this comprehensive single pane of governance where whether you're dealing with a streaming use case or a BI use case, AI, or doing ETL, you have the same consistent rules that are applied, observed, and enforced. Right? Now, one might think, hey, by centralizing this governance, what are we giving up? Do we lose freedom elsewhere? That's certainly not the case with Unity Catalog. And the way we kind of architected Unity Catalog is to give a lot of optionality through federation. We support catalog federation. So if there are other catalogs, other Iceberg or high Metastore catalogs, we can integrate with those so that a different engine that really only understands how to say talk to Iceberg catalog, Unity Catalog can interact with it. Similarly, we support query federation. So if for some transitionary period, you have some of your data sitting in a cloud data warehouse, we give you the ability to query that from within Databricks while still enforcing any governance requirements you have. Now, this could also be like your reference data, for example, sitting in a Postgres database. The same sort of concept applies. Now, as you start getting more into the consumption layer, right, whether it's you're coming in from a BI application or increasingly more data applications, we still provide a surface and interface through APIs, through drivers, that gives you that full comprehensive support within that ecosystem. Now, another way of looking at that unification of that Unity Catalog provides is within the AI application space, right? So whether you're dealing with simpler structured SQL for reporting, or you want to actually augment that structured data with unstructured data where you actually have a AI-based application, Gen AI-based application, and you actually want to call out, reach out, and do some inference against an Anthropic endpoint, we provide that capability. And we provide that capability also in the other direction, where we have an MCP server. So if there are agents outside of Databricks that want to learn or leverage the data intelligence Databricks has, we make that available too. And we do all this in a performant manner. And at Databricks, we have a very strong focus on performance and keeping your cost within checks. Right? This is just an example, right? The kinds of things that you can do where suddenly the analyst who primarily understands SQL now has the ability to do actually interact with the model and actually start incorporating that into their day-to-day worksheet, right? So whether it is doing analysis on some multimodal images or PDFs or documents, this is all enabled. And this is something First American has a fantastic use case around this, where they basically analyze all these titles, property records, and actually utilize that to improve their own offerings. In a nutshell, it's really around the openness, the unification of governance, and last but not the least, it's the TCO, right? We provide all of these capabilities, the openness and governance and flexibility. At the same time, you don't have to make that compromise on the performance side. And we do this through use of AI, and we still provide the same sort of performance or better performance that you typically get with, say, a cloud data warehouse through the use of AI. We'll automatically, for instance, figure out the statistics of how these tables should have been laid out and utilize that in the query planning. Or if the nature of a table actually starts to change, what you partition by, what you index by, or cluster by, we automatically discover that using AI and adapt it so that your performance and your cost profile remain low. Now, this is great as a target state, but how do you get there? And this is where we partner very closely with folks like Sanjay from Impetus, where you typically have this you inherit this legacy system where there's this proprietary SQL, complex data models, and there's a great deal of complexity that you're taking on. And it's quite labor intensive even to just assess or plan these kinds of modernization or migration efforts. And often there is a lack of automation in this assessment and these implementations. We work very closely with Impetus. We've been partners for several years now, and they take a very comprehensive approach, starting from assessment all the way, taking you through the transformation, working with your business users on validation, and getting this into production and operationalized. To tell you more about this, I pass this off to Sanjay. Sanjay, please take over.
Thanks, Katie. Good afternoon, morning, everyone. Let me introduce myself again. I'm Sanjay Sharma, Principal Architect and VP of Product Engineering at Impetus Technologies. Today, I'm excited to share how Leap Logic, our flagship automated migration solution, is revolutionizing data platform modernization with embedded governance. Let me start by establishing our credentials. Impetus is almost 30 years old today and brings 17 plus years of experience building mission critical large-scale data platforms across finance, transportation, healthcare, and manufacturing. We're not just another service provider. We are industry-leading specialists in data and AI transformation. What sets us apart is our value-driven approach, from groundbreaking Gen AI, Gen BI innovation labs to enterprise-scale modern data platforms. We deliver accelerated time to deployment and exceptional business outcomes. Our strategic partnership with Databricks and all cloud vendors aren't just vendor relationships, they're deep technical integrations that power our solutions. The recognition as Databricks Enterprise Data Warehouse Partner of the Year 2025 and our consecutive Migration Partner Awards for 2023 and 2024 validate our approach. This isn't just about moving data. It's about transforming how organizations govern and utilize their data assets for competitive advantage. Our partnership with Databricks has enabled us to define, deliver automated Gen AI-powered solutions that drive faster insights and smarter decisions for our clients. So here's how we deliver on our promise of unified modernization and governance. Our portfolio centers around what we call the Intelligent Enterprise Unified Data Platform. And notice how governance isn't an afterthought. It is an integrated throughout every service we offer. In cloud data platform engineering, we just don't deploy data lakes and lake houses. We embedded governance through our Unity Catalog Modernization and Data Catalog Accelerator. This aligns perfectly with what Fern was sharing. Policies and tooling around data governance, cataloging, and stewardship show the strongest correlation with data readiness. Our Leap Logic automated migration solution isn't just about code transformation. It's about preserving and enhancing governance capabilities as part of the modernization process. So whether you are migrating EDW, ETL, or SaaS or BI workloads, governance controls are built into every step. The governance and cybersecurity pillars include our Gen AI labs for accelerated delivery to design to delivery, custom RAG framework development, and AI governance. Because as TDWI notes, governance cannot be an afterthought in the AI era. We are building zero trust systems and identity access management that support both current and future AI initiatives. As part of the migrations over the last 10 years, we have auto-transformed over 100 million lines of legacy code, delivering up to 95% automation in migration projects. It isn't just about speed. It's about preserving 100% of business logic while embedding modern governance practices. We never do lift and shift as it usually does not meet the governance enforcement. What is particularly powerful is our up to 75 reduction in migration project delivery time. But here's the key differentiator. This acceleration does not come at the cost of governance. In fact, Our intelligent pattern-based transformation technology has been trained on billions of lines of code and millions of lines of production code over 10 plus years. Learning not only just how to transform code, but how to enhance governance maturity in the process. That's exactly what Fern and the TDWI research advocates. Upfront data governance that reduces data quality issues, builds trust, decreases compliance risks, and supports analytics, including self-service AI and BI. Leap Logic makes IT an enabler by automating the complex task of embedding governance into modernized platforms. The debt elimination and code efficiency improvements we deliver align with Databricks Unity Catalog principle of define once, secure everywhere. But we're not just migrating, we're modernizing with governance at the core. Let us deep dive a little bit further. This slide illustrates our comprehensive four-step automated migration approach that embeds governance throughout the entire process. Let me walk through how we ensure governance isn't bolted on afterwards, but built in from the start. As part of the assessment and analysis, we provide automated analysis of workloads and dependencies with actionable recommendations. This isn't just technical analysis. We're identifying governance gaps and opportunities to enhance data lineage, cataloging, and stewardship capabilities, along with audit and compliance gaps. Our end-to-end intelligent transformation step to Databricks native stack includes automated conversion to Databricks stacks like notebooks and workflows. But more importantly, we're transforming your legacy governance model to leverage Unity Catalog, centralized data catalog with access control, auditing, lineage, and quality monitoring. As part of pipeline-based validation, we just don't validate data. We validate governance controls and compliance frameworks also. This ensures your modernized platform meets regulatory requirements from day one. Lastly, but not the least, as part of operationalization, the productionization with controlled price performance ratio includes deploying governance automation, CI/CD pipelines, and the operational excellence that Unity Catalog enables. With up to 95% automated migration, we are proving that governance and modernization can be unified without sacrificing speed or quality. This slide here represents the heart of our governance by design philosophy. Let me explain how Leap Logic automatically enforces governance as a part of modernization, not as a separate effort. We automatically create comprehensive metadata catalogs for all legacy migrations to Unity Catalog. Whether migrating from on-premise system or existing cloud platforms, our Unity Catalog Migration Accelerator or UCMA ensures seamless metadata preservation and enhancement. We implement Databricks well-architected framework with data governance, security, privacy, and performance efficiency, cost optimization, operational excellence, all inbuilt in the Medallion architecture out of the box. For example, from the regional banks in US, we were able to migrate Informatica data quality or IDQ implementation that managed some financial regulatory reporting automatically. We're not just modernizing for today, we are preparing for Gen AI integration, post-migration with compliance enforcement, and Gen BI migration for legacy reports and dashboards. The results speak for themselves, up to 40% cost reduction, 50% faster implementations, enhanced governance maturity, and proactive compliance with audit and regulatory reporting. This is governance design delivering measurable business value. Now, these are just few of the customer logos, but these represent more than just successful implementations. They represent proven governance transformation at enterprise scale. Many Fortune 500 organizations have trusted us with their most critical data assets. Let me share a few specific results that demonstrate governance impact. AARP achieved 80% automation migration from SaaS to Databricks with 25% infrastructure cost savings. Another Fortune 500 BFSI enterprise saw 70% auto conversion of workloads with 50% cost savings. But here's what's crucial. These weren't just technical migrations. Each transformation included comprehensive governance framework implementations, automated audit trails, data lineage, preservation, and compliance enforcement. As one customer noted, we just don't migrate their code. We enhance their governance capabilities and build missing governance features into the modernized platform. Our customers aren't just modernizing, they are transforming their governance maturity to support advanced analytics and AI initiatives. I'll summarize by talking about, on a high level, a strategy, discovery, and assessment services for Databricks. This represents a comprehensive approach needed for successful governance embedded modernization. Again, this just isn't a technical assessment, it's a holistic evaluation of current state that sets the foundation for governance by design. The data governance and compliance is prominently featured because it's central to everything we do. We assess your current governance maturity, identify gaps, and define a unified governance strategy that leverages Unity Catalog's readiness. Similarly, with Gen AI and Gen BI readiness, the assessment also enables any gaps that are there. And to add on to that, we'll evaluate our data readiness, governance readiness, and AI readiness as a part of the integrated assessment. Thank you for your attention. I'm excited to discuss how Leap Logic can help you achieve unified modernization and governance for your organization. Andrew, over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Sanjay. It is now time for our panel discussion, so I'll ask that Fern rejoin us. And Fern, I will pass it back to you for the discussion.
Great. Thanks, Andrew. I'm looking forward to speaking with both of you, both really interesting presentations there about what your platforms and services can do. So my first question sort of builds on what we've been talking about all along, and I'll ask Katie this question first. You know, we talked about governance and modernization together, and Sanjay talked a little bit about some of the benefits. Can you talk to me more about what the benefits of addressing modernization and governance as a single initiative would be?
Sure, Fern. Thanks again for hosting this. Really looking forward to this. Typically, when we have customers thinking about modernization versus migration, one of the things that they're dealing with is a little bit of the, what I would say, the nuts and bolts of, hey, how am I going to do this migration/modernization? And that governance, addressing governance at the same time seems like a daunting challenge and daunting ask at that point. But what's interesting is having a handle on governance and utilizing a lot of these tools that are tied to governance can actually help you figure out your modernization approach itself. So I'll start from there. So quite often we have Impetus and some of our partners bring in some tooling around that can actually understand the lineage of this data. Hey, what system access, what data? And very often we find that 30, 40, 50% of the data estate is going entirely unutilized. Why? Usually it's because there's a lot of legacy sort of build up there. Or another reason why that also happens is data governance is not implemented as well as you want to do it. You end up sort of building something that's super secure, but it's not easy to discover, not easy to access. Those are all some of the reasons that you kind of have this lot of craft within your existing legacy ecosystem. Now, by using governance-related toolings, you can actually accelerate your modernization by saying, hey, there's a whole bunch of data assets that are not used. I'm not going to prioritize modernizing those. I'm just going to focus on the ones which are high impact. Now, in addition to that, as you're adopting a modern platform like a Lakehouse platform, where you are bringing together multiple governance domains under one single entity, it's an opportunity for simplifying the governance. And you have, for example, capabilities such as attribute-based access control. I'll take that as an example. rather than having elaborate grants for different groups. Hey, if you're in this group, you'll have access to this data, but I don't want to provide you access to certain portions of this data, so I'm going to create like a dynamic view or a row level filter or a column level filter. You can actually define this as a policy, use attribute-based access control, assign as attributes to the data assets, to the users. And in this manner, you can actually simplify your entire governance strategy. And the moment you simplify governance, scaling governance becomes easier, and adoption of these data assets becomes easier. So that's so I look at it both ways. One, as using governance as a tool to simplify modernization, and then by taking on a more modern governance tool, simplify adoption of the data assets.
Yeah, those are really important benefits, that's for sure. Sanjay, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that? You may be on mute.
Yes, sorry about that. So yeah, I think adding to what Katie mentioned, one of the important aspects is the cost of implementing governance post-modernization has a huge overhead. So doing it together certainly helps in not only meeting functional requirements, but also regulatory compliance of the requirements at the same time. So our recommendation is do it always together as a single initiative. Otherwise, we see a lot of projects just failing due to regulatory compliances.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense as well. And you know, I think we're starting to address this question also. And Sanjay, I'll ask you, excuse me, this first. But how do companies embed governance by design? Really, what are the principles involved? How should they be thinking about this?
Sure. So I think one of the most important aspects is, as a part of the modernization, embed governance by design that involves typically integrating compliance, risk management, and operations controls into the architecture, design, and the implementation process itself. Early development of frameworks and templates for cataloging, audit logging, data lineage, data protection and security, industry compliance, and now responsible AI is highly effective in applying these principles. Now, good thing is Databricks is already providing the necessary capabilities to meet all these requirements. LeapLogic offers these Databricks compliant frameworks that not only use these principles, but also embed them as a part of the modernization process. Not just for the code. It might be for the CI/CD, it might be an other automated audit process that we have added at each step of the data lifecycle. For example, for one of the customers, again in the financial domain, we were able to implement an audit framework in addition to whatever they were having, which used to do a reconciliation between the different steps of the ETL process, right from ingestion to the consumption. And with so many penalties around regulatory compliances today, it does make sense to apply these principles early on.
And Katie, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would add that you kind of have this boundary between where people and machines interact, right? You kind of have to understand as part of this this modernization or rationalization effort that's going on. What I mean by that is understanding, hey, what are the rights of users, the groups, what are the assets they need to have access to? And I go back to the example I used earlier about attribute-based access control. So there are all those mechanisms that make it simpler to actually do governance. So it's like it kind of makes doing the right thing the simple thing, right? And that I think is one of the principles to adhere to, which is simplicity. The moment something becomes complex, either on the administration or the governance side, or on its enforcement side, or on the discovery side, it's a failed effort, because yes, you do need to keep your data secure and manage the risk around its exfiltration. But if it's so secure that no one accesses it, then it's of zero value to your business.
And
So
we talked
simplicity.
a little bit about the partnership, but Katie, can you tell us what automation features does the partnership provide around data and AI governance and how they're used?
Yeah, I will definitely want to get Sanjay's take on this as well, especially because Impetus Leap Logic has certain unique capabilities. Now, as a platform provider, the way we look at it is the surface and the APIs that we make available to partners like Impetus. And there's a great example I'll use here. I brought up Lineage as an important tool when you are planning your migration. But Lineage goes way beyond that. From risk management standpoint, compliance standpoint, Lineage is how you document the current state of your data estate. That's what you use for any auditory requirements or reporting that comes about. Now, the way we built Lineage within Databricks, any sort of assets that we manage, we provide visibility and Lineage for that automatically. However, the reality is that most customers live in a large ecosystem where there are different tools. Even if not integrated with Unity Catalog, we want to be able to provide that visibility. And that's where we introduced an API for different tools, different customers to bring their own lineage information into our platform. So what that means is even for source systems upstream of Databricks that we are not necessarily tied to, we can actually have a representation of that lineage end to end. Now, and that through automation, through API, that lineage can actually get built within Databricks. And the more intelligence and understanding Databricks has of this end-to-end lineage and the interrelationship between this AI and data assets, the stronger our data intelligence capabilities become. The greater is our comprehension of how these different seemingly unrelated entities come together. Right? And I'm curious to also hear, Sanjay, your perspective on this.
Yes. Interestingly, I think we, of course, are helping with setting the platform for using Unity Catalog and the associated lineage with it. You mentioned about the API usage. So we have the ability to use and automate it and embed it as a part of the existing upstream and downstream. For example, just as you mentioned, I remembered a use case where this bank had, of course, on-prem system. They were not thinking of migrating into the cloud, but then they had a pipeline in place which used to extract data from here before Databricks Connect, by the way, which used to connect data, and they used to do some regulatory compliance for that extract and then push the data to AWS or S3, and then from S3 get loaded to the data lake. So we were able to have this audit capability at each step, but now we are talking about creating this lineage using those API within the Databricks catalog itself. So that way we are ending up with visibility of not only what is happening inside Databricks, but also upstream and downstream, thanks to this API access.
That's a powerful example. You talked about the partnership, but Katie, can you say a few words about more about the partnership in terms of helping with unifying the governance, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. Databricks as a company, we look at, if I go back to what I opened with, we are looking to democratize data and AI. Right? We want to make data and AI accessible to more and more customers, companies, and more types of users, communities of users within those companies. However, we are a product company. We are focused on building a platform that is usable and useful for many customers. We are also a platform company in the sense that we rely and we want to rely on our partners to actually build solutions for our joint customers so that we can actually scale and reach to many more groups, many more users, right? So this is where we look at folks like Sanjay, who are thought leaders in the space, to actually take these best practices that we have jointly learned and built and adapted, and take those best practices and incorporate those into the architectures for these enterprises. There is this framework that AWS initially introduced called well-architected framework. So anytime you're doing AWS deployment of different services, there's this well-architected framework which lists out different best practices, and adhering to those gives you positive results. Borrowing from the same idea, we extended the well-architected framework to a couple of additional pillars that are specific to Databricks Lakehouse architecture. And those practices, those are the kinds of things that Impetus actually takes on and takes that practical knowledge and practices and implements them for our customers. So we really look at Impetus and similar partners as a way for us to reach much larger much larger communities of groups and customers so that we can democratize data and AI.
Yeah, let me then end this portion because I see questions coming in from the audience with a question for Sanjay, since Katie was talking about all the best practices. What's the best way to get started?
So I think I did touch upon the assessment capability. It's usually 3 to 4 weeks, but the easiest way to get started is to reach out to your Databricks partner or sales representative or Impetus sales team. We can then jointly engage in a quick assessment to come up with a fixed bid, even for modernization with governance and compliances baked in.
Makes sense. Thank you both so much for this discussion. What I'm going to do is turn it back over to Andrew and see if we have time for any audience Q&A. So Andrew, over to you.
All right, terrific. Thank you all. That was a great discussion there. And yeah, we have some questions from the audience. I'll try to get to at least 2 of them here. And we'll start off with this first question. Sanjay, maybe we'll start with you. This person asks, how are the data quality and regulatory compliances addressed?
So Leap Logic Modernization includes migrating any existing data quality frameworks and compliances as well. For example, if somebody is using Informatica data quality suite or Ab initio BRE, which are business rules, or anything else as a part of their existing legacy architecture, we can convert those to Databricks compliant notebooks, which are usually usable rule-based frameworks. Now, if none exists on legacy side, the same framework can be easily configured to add data quality checks easily. Similarly, all compliance reporting is not only modernized, but additionally, it opens up opportunities for AI-based enhancements for better and faster reporting.
All right, terrific. We'll move on to the next question here. And Katie, this one I think is for you, or at least maybe I'll have you start. So this question is, how will companies ensure that the architecture is improved and future ready?
Yeah, I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, right? So this is, I go back to this well-architected framework where there are this very clear, discrete pillars that we have identified. And these pillars represent different areas of best practices when you're implementing a platform like Databricks, right? Some of the common pillars are around operational excellence, how you manage the platform, how you implement security, not just at the platform level, but also on the data security, how you implement privacy, compliance, how you actually automatically detect PI data, et cetera. So these are a set of practices that we have encoded there. How do you actually manage reliability, right? What should your resiliency approach look like? Number 4, how do you actually manage performance? Now, a large part of the performance is automated, right? So this is where we rely on AI. I mentioned this a little bit during my talk, where we have this predictive capabilities. We can predict what kind of query patterns we generally observe. We can also use AI to figure out what our query plan for this often seen patterns or some variations of these patterns needs to be. So performance, while there are a whole bunch of practices, there's a lot that we bake into the platform itself to happen automatically. Data governance and interoperability, I spoke a ton about governance, right? So making this the right thing, the simple thing to do is one of the principles, and there's certain practices, best practices we recommend there. Adoption of attribute-based access control is an example. Interoperability is a key pillar for us as well. And here, just the fundamental architecture in terms of the adoption of the open table formats, whether it's Delta, and / or Iceberg, adoption of Unity catalog, these are all the foundational capabilities of the platform. They already kind of push you more and more towards that interoperable state. Last, but one of the most important one which I also think is associated with governance is around cost optimization and FinOps, right? So from the get-go, the architecture that needs to get deployed, we provide policies, capabilities, not just for your data access, but also who can do what within the platform from a cost management and budgetary standpoint, right? So we look at architecture holistically, and that's the reason, rather than keep this as abstract concepts, we have very discrete pillars that we've identified that our partners are not just educated on, they have contributed to, and they actually use this every single day in their implementations.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you so much. And unfortunately, we are out of time. We actually gave a couple extra minutes to the folks here. So thank you again for everyone's time and attention here. And thank you to those audience members that asked questions. But it is time for us to say goodbye. So please allow me to thank our speakers. We heard from Fern Halper with TDWI, Kaudinya Srinivasarao with Databricks, and Sanjay Sharma with Impetus. Would also like to thank again Databricks and Impetus for sponsoring today's webinar. And please remember, we did record today's webinar. We'll be emailing you a link to an archived version. And if you'd like a copy of the presentation today, you can locate the resource window to download the PDF. Finally, for those unfamiliar, TDWI hosts in-person educational events, and our next one is in San Diego, taking place August 18th through the 22nd. As a valued webinar attendee, we're offering each and every one of you $100 off any event package. Please check your post-webinar communications for a unique discount code and a link to further details. And from all of us here, let me say thank you so much for attending. This does conclude today's event.